Hey guys, my name is Brandon and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you like what you see in here, you're more than welcome to hit the subscribe button so you stay notified every time I upload a new video. Okay, let's get straight on with today's video. Hey everyone and welcome back to Is That More Brandon. So in today's video I'm going to be doing a review to the 8th episode of the Traitors UK Series 2. So at the beginning of the episode we found out from the last episode that traitors Paul and Harry were going to recruit another traitor to obviously join their team. They just lost Miles. They basically banished him along with some of the others at the round table, and they basically decided they were either going to recruit Andrew, Zach, Jasmine or Ross, just purely because they all have a little bit of heat on them already, or they are good players to kind of have on their side. They basically said that they should just get someone as kind of like a shield to protect the both of them, also hoping that the person says yes. And Andrew was obviously given the invitation to be a traitor. He was the chosen one, and he basically said that he kind of wasn't really expecting this. Paul said to Harry that obviously Andrew's a big personality and he might end up getting knocked out anyway because he's already got a bit of fire on him. And Andrew said, well, if I don't join, they're probably going to murder me, so I feel like I kind of just have to join. Obviously when he met Harry and Paul as traitors, he kind of said, oh my god, I actually expected Jazz to be in here. And he said he even defended Paul so much to kind of now find out that Paul was actually a traitor. Paul said to Andrew that in terms of the other traitors, Ash was very weak and Miles kind of just had to go when he went, just because obviously again his gameplay was kind of not as great, and it was going to happen at some point. And he basically just said that anyone with eyes on them, it's better to keep them kind of in the game, because then they'll all kind of go against each other, the fire will be kind of off of the traitors, and then they will kind of slip through to the end. And then Andrew basically said hopefully he's not thrown under the bus like Miles was. And obviously Andrew was quite angry with the both of them for kind of choosing him and for kind of doing what they've done. And Harry basically said to the camera they kind of made a mistake. Andrew's obviously angry. It's a bit of a tough scenario, so it's just kind of see what happens from here. Both Paul and Harry had a chat and they said that obviously Andrew didn't seem happy, and we now found out there were 8 faithfuls and 3 traitors left in the game. And Harry basically said that he's not sure he can trust Andrew. Jazz explained that he's confident Paul is a traitor, and at breakfast we found out the 2 people that didn't come back were either Charlotte or Ross. They both came back, and Charlotte and Zach both in their little group said that they feel like someone has been recruited. And Jasmine said that she's not really sure if they've accepted it, so they've been invited but they necessarily haven't accepted it. And Charlotte basically explained that they've either recruited someone who they genuinely think can help them out as a fellow traitor, or they've chosen someone who they think they can just grab and then throw at the wall to kind of get them out of the game, to kind of get the fire again off their back. And Charlie asked Andrew if he would be a traitor, and he basically said he wouldn't, purely because it's against his moral compass. Claudia actually asked Jasmine to throw her a cupcake, and she basically said, oh, I was just checking your aim. And Charlotte straight away just had a feeling that the game was going to be something to do with archery. In simple, what they basically had to do was just aim with a bow and arrow at a glass panel which had all of their names on it, and if they broke that particular glass, that person wasn't going to receive a shield. The last person to have their glass shattered, I guess, or for the one that didn't get their glass shattered, that person was obviously going to get the shield. Paul and Harry had a chat with each other just before the mission. Harry had a chat with Ross, and then they basically, Ross basically told them both that he feels like he's now an easy target. Zach and Jazz basically both had a chat and said that they both agree that Paul is a traitor, and it felt like there was 2 traitors going against each other. Charlie joined the conversation, and Charlotte also joined the conversation, saying that Paul did stick up for Miles quite a lot, even though Miles ended up being a traitor. So again, that kind of puts a bit of a flag on Paul. Jasmine said to Molly and Ross that there's things that Zach says they're a little bit weird, and Ross also added that the fact that they voted out Ash, he kind of did have his suspicions on Paul before, but that's kind of now out of the window. And Jasmine said that she's suspicious of both Zach and Jazz. So we kind of see Zach and Jazz here as a little bit of a duo. Obviously they are both faithful, but I think they're both doing questionable things and kind of traitor-like things, or they're just getting so involved in different conversations that people are going to think that at least one of them is a traitor, if not both. And then, yeah, so obviously the traitors, all three of them had a chat with Charlotte, and she basically said that she doesn't really trust Zach or Jazz. So again, all of those, Harry, Andrew and Paul were all kind of sitting there listening to Charlotte. And, you know, it's one of those things like, she doesn't know she's literally talking to all three of the traitors, but at the same time, she could probably kind of grasp that at least one of those three she probably shouldn't be able to trust. And she also added that Jazz did a lot of random voting at the round table. Charlotte was asked whether she would have been a traitor, and she said if she would have been offered it earlier, she would have accepted it, but absolutely not now. And then Zach said, okay, and if you didn't accept it, then you'd obviously get killed. So kind of here, he's hinting that she has had the offer and that she's declined it. So they kind of had a backwards and forwards disagreement. Again, Zach didn't really let Charlotte speak. He was asking her questions. She wasn't actually able to answer the question. So they basically had a little bit of a disagreement there. And Zach basically was a bit concerned because Paul's closest friend in the game so far is Charlotte. So he potentially thinks, you know, that Paul or Charlotte could be a traitor at this point. In terms of the minigame, Claudia welcomed them all by saying welcome to church, with Charlotte saying I've not been here in a while. And again, like I said, they had one shot with the arrow to obviously save who they wanted to get a shield. Zach basically explained he's a good crossbower, and Claudia had to ask all of them individually, who doesn't deserve a shield, who are you going to, you know, shatter the glass of? And he said he was going to go for Paul because he was the most suspicious as traitor. He actually missed completely and said, oh, it's a ballista, not a crossbow. So the type of bow, I guess, didn't really work. Harry went for Jasmine, saying that she's won shields before. He got Jasmine, so she didn't get the shield. Charlotte went for Zach, missed. Andrew went for Harry, accidentally got Ross, so no shield for Ross. Jazz got Harry, Charlie got Jazz, Paul went for Andrew, all three of those missed. Jasmine went for Andrew, saying it was the easiest one to hit, but missed. Ross went for Andrew, and Evie went for Andrew, both of them missed. And then Paul basically had a little idea that wherever they were to aim, they needed to keep an eye on where the bullet went and kind of just adjust up, down, left or right to kind of make it easier to get. So at one point it was very, very close to Jazz's shattered glass. So Paul kind of just hinted for the next person to go for Jazz because it's already kind of set up and you just need to move it a little bit. And Jazz basically said Paul is setting a trend as an easy target to get him out purely because it was kind of already lined up, and he kind of had a feeling Paul was going to go after him anyway. So it was a weird way of doing it. Of like, come on, it's already set up. You might as well just go for Jazz now. Like, he's there. And then we found out either Charlie or Molly would actually get the shield purely because neither of them had had their glass shattered. Molly said it was awful fighting with a friend over a shield, and in the end, Paul went for Charlie, shattered her glass, and Molly received the shield. Jazz had a chat with Harry, Molly, and Evie, saying that the game kind of started as fun and then it got a little bit deep with kind of Paul's involvement within the middle. Jasmine said to Ross, Charlotte and Paul that Harry was saying the fact that he was being targeted was a little bit weird. It was obviously just a game. And Paul and Andrew had a quick chat basically saying that everyone seems to be going for Jazz, and Andrew said for Paul not to throw Andrew under the bus, obviously like what he did with the other two traitors. Paul and Zach then had a chat, so I think here Paul was maybe trying to get a little bit of, you know, intel from Zach in terms of who he's going to vote for, and Zach said he was either going to be voting for Paul and potentially Jazz. The only reason he still has his mind set on this is because obviously Paul wasn't murdered in the dungeon, it's a little bit suspicious, and he said he has laser eyes set on Paul. Paul basically explained that Miles was a traitor and he obviously managed to get him out, and Zach said potentially he either guessed really, really well or he threw another traitor out of the game to kind of make out that he was the hero to do that. So yeah, I don't think Zach's stupid in this case. And then Paul basically said to the camera, well, actually maybe we should kill Zach. So yeah, let's see what happens there. Maybe Zach does know a little bit too much, and if they get rid of him from the game, will it be too obvious that, you know, it was Paul that took him out? Evie said she also never seemed to get past the dungeon thing, so she was talking to Andrew, Charlotte and Harry. Charlotte said that Harry seemed to want the shield a lot, and Harry basically said that he was going to now come after Paul, with the fact that Paul basically had Harry's name in his mouth. Harry basically jumped in here and said, look, he doesn't really say names at the table, he gets traitors out to look like the hero, and he basically said Paul thinks that he's the mastermind when actually, you know, Harry's the mastermind, and he's kind of going to show him how that's a thing. In terms of the round table, Andrew said it was a strange feeling because it was his first round table as a traitor. Harry said he's anxious about Paul, but he needs everyone to jump on the same bandwagon. And Paul said that there at some point will be a showdown. He's ready to fight back, receive this, and then obviously give it back as well. Claudia explained that the prize pot at the moment was £60,150, and she actually, before the round table started, asked everyone to say, "I am a faithful," and look everybody else in the eye, obviously with that courage and conviction. So to start the round table, it was Charlie. She kind of went straight for Charlotte, saying the situation that came up about the drinks. I think Charlotte was kind of saying, well, actually, it might not just be the drink thing, it might be something else, kind of deflecting off the fact that she was giving drinks to people, and also the fact that she thought Zach was a traitor. The chat that she had with him that kind of ended up in a disagreement or argument was kind of a similar chat that happened with Miles. Charlotte then jumped in here straight away saying, the whole reason I couldn't actually fight my case with Zach is because he was asking me questions back to back to back and not actually letting me answer questions. And she said, well, actually, Charlie, I thought you could have been a traitor at one point because you've been quite quiet at the round table. And she said that she's never not come to the table without voting for a traitor. She's never been voted at the round table, so there must be something she's doing right. And she said it hurts her to say it, but she definitely has a question mark on Paul. She has her suspicions of him, but she's not the only person. Harry, fellow traitor, also jumped in, said in terms of the challenges, he wants to walk through fire in order to win some of the missions. And he also said that because he's close to Paul, maybe that's the reason, for example, him and Charlotte haven't been evicted from the game, because they are so close to him. He sees them as genuine faithfuls. He said that Paul seems to overcompensate on why people have voted for him. He's a big personality outside, but obviously quite quiet on the round table. And the fact that he put himself and Ash in the dungeon, thinking that people would vote for him as the most popular. He thought that they would potentially save him. And he's also brought Zach, Jazz and Harry's name into the picture of who he thinks is potentially a traitor. 3 people who probably can't really be traitors. And, there's just random names that he's kind of brought up. Paul basically explained that Harry has his eyes wide open, and his response was kind of saying, like, with a bit of a sad face, like, that's a lot of information to take in, like, I'm just trying to get over that right now. And then Jazz kind of said he always had suspicions about Paul. Is it too obvious for Jazz to be, like, murdered, because then it will look like Paul's murdered him? So I think at this point Jazz is completely fine. And Ross said to Harry that he's probably a clever guy, but he does not think Paul is a traitor. And if Paul is a traitor, then Ross has basically condemned himself. And, it then looks like he's working with the traitors, or it looks like he's potentially been recruited. And Ross also said that Jazz seems to be doing weird things with his behaviour and the way he does his votes. And Jazz basically said he goes with his gut. Sometimes he gets it wrong, but majority of the time he has an idea and he will just run with it. Zach said about Jazz that it's so difficult not to vote for him just purely because he's a little bit confusing. And Jazz basically said that he was in the car with Harry, Evie and Molly, and he said it was a little bit weird and that Evie and Molly haven't spoken up about Paul. As vocal as they were in the car, they kind of, keeping their opinions to themselves at the table. And everyone kind of said, oh, Jazz, you're like deflecting and da-da-da. But I guess it's true. It's like, if you have an opinion, just be brave and say it. Don't kind of like hide, sit in the background, because then when you're asked, you'll deny it. But there's people that genuinely know, like, the opinions that you've had. And Jazz also kind of looked at Ross and said, well, I hope you haven't been recruited. And Jazz basically said, if he does go up there, just remember Paul. So if he was to get voted out of the round table, banished at the round table, yes, Paul survives another round. Yes, Paul would have survived another murdering, but remember Paul, and whether he gets murdered or whether he doesn't, the light would be then shone on him. When it came to the votes, it was very, very close. In the end, Jazz got 4 votes for himself, Paul got 7, and finally Paul was banished. He revealed he was a traitor. Everyone was screaming and cheering, and Paul basically explained Harry taking him down in that moment was really, really good, and it was very brave of him to do that, with Jazz saying, what did I say? Harry saying his work here was done, and Charlotte saying that Paul was the best traitor that ever existed. Harry then spoke to the camera and said, well, hang on, he was the best traitor ever existed, but they still don't even know that I'm a traitor. They think I'm still a faithful. So at this point, I think Harry's the best traitor that's ever existed. And then we found out there was 10 people left. So 2 traitors, Harry and Andrew. So we'd already lost Paul, Miles, and Ash, the other three, and 8 faithful. So Charlie, Charlotte, Ross, Molly, Zach, Jazz, Evie, and Jasmine. So I think Harry at the moment is very, very in the clear. Andrew obviously has a bit of fire on him. Charlie, very faithful. Charlotte, a little bit suspicious, but I don't think she'll get voted out. I think they want to keep her in the game because she's already got fire on herself. Ross seems very suspicious with all his weird accusations. Annie hasn't revealed that Diane is his mum, but I don't think he's going to. I think they're going to keep that completely a secret. I think Molly's completely in the clear, so she'll be fine. Zach and Jazz, I think both of them have very weird ways of showing their, you know, ideas and, you know, who they think is and isn't a traitor. So I think both of them are potentially in trouble. Evie again seems very clear, other than the drink situation, and then Jasmine again, I think very, very faithful. You can't really tell that she's anything but faithful. She might be very vocal, but doesn't necessarily mean you're not a faithful. So I think there's a few of the faithfuls that have basically messed it up for themselves, and they probably will be some of the ones next to. Well, I don't even think they will be some of the next ones to go, because they want to get the actual faithfuls out and just have the problematic ones left in the game, but we'll see what happens. Anyway, when Paul left, Molly basically said, how can Paul cry on cue that well? Charlie basically shouted Harry for president, and Andrew basically said he's going to be cautious and obviously fight for himself. Obviously, everyone's kind of like praising Harry, but at the end of the day, he wants to win as well, and you know, he can't really go against Harry at this point, but he's just going to focus on himself and, you know, hope that Harry doesn't try and take him out as well. Jazz basically explained to Ross that, you know, he didn't just try and vote for him, he also tried to get other people on board to vote for him, with Ross saying that it felt like it was the worst decision he's made, and Jazz actually at that point said, well, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to trust you now. And then Harry and Andrew had a chat, and Andrew basically said to Harry that it feels like Jazz is now going to go for him based on evidence, supposedly. So obviously Andrew's kind of a bit like, well, hang on, what evidence? And Harry basically said he's either going to go for Ross or Jazz. So, you know, at that point, Ross, Jazz, Zach, kind of all in the red. Any of those three could probably go next. Harry basically said to Andrew in the little traitors pot that he did not trust Paul. Harry now looks like the hero, and Harry basically said he does trust Andrew. He also said it would be a bit stupid if Andrew goes against him, because people see Harry as a hero, so it's like, you know, Harry can basically control the game now. He can say Andrew's bad, they'll trust him. He can say Andrew's good, they'll trust him. And he basically said they can either seduce somebody else who will then kind of take the forfeit for the both of them, or they just get rid of somebody else from the game. And Andrew basically said here they just need to murder someone, they just need to get somebody else out, get the numbers down. There'll be 9 people left, and, you know, that's 1 less faithful to have to worry about later on. And yeah, Harry said in terms of who they should murder, potentially Zach, because he obviously wasn't a traitor and it won't look like that they've murdered him. And then in the end, they said potentially Jazz, because he seems to have no persuasion. Charlotte, she seems to have a loud voice. Keep her in because she's kind of suspicious anyway. Ross condemned himself. Charlie's kind of in the clear, and Andrew basically said that Charlie's not even really a threat. In the end, they decided it was either going to be Charlie or Zach. Andrew said that he hopes him and Harry can actually do this together as a team, and Harry basically explained he does trust Andrew a lot, and he said, look, if you come for me, I'll put you 6 feet under, like I've done 3 times before. So that's kind of where episode 8 ended. We don't actually know who they've got rid of, either Charlie or Zach. I think if they get rid of Charlie, nothing really much is going to happen. I think they'll just think, okay, well, you know, Charlie was genuinely a faithful, she's gone, what a shame, let's move on. I guess if they get rid of Zach, it'll be like, hang on, so potentially it could be Ross, potentially it could be Jazz. They're going to both be in the firing line straight away because they both thought it was Zach. And I think there's a few others that, Charlotte, for example, also kind of thinks it's Zach with their little disagreement. So if they get rid of Zach, it makes it look like potentially one of those 3 rather than Harry or Andrew, who I don't think either, well, I guess Harry's kind of had some suspicions about Zach, but not as much as the other 3. But yeah, if they get rid of Charlie, she didn't really have any enemies. So it's kind of, hang on, why did they get rid of her as opposed to somebody else? So yeah, very interesting episode. But like I said, we have 10 people left at the moment, 2 traitors, 8 faithful. But at the end of this episode, in terms of the next episode, we will lose one of those faithfuls and we will then have 9 people left. So like I said, Zach is in the top 9. Charlie is in the top 9. Well, actually, only one of those 2 is in the top 9. Evie's in the top 9. Jasmine's in the top 9. Charlotte, Ross, Molly, Jazz, Harry and Andrew in the top 9. So either Charlie or Zach will join them all. So yeah, until episode 9, thank you for watching. I'll be with you very, very soon. And until then, thank you and goodbye.